This is the Awful Announcing Podcast. Here's your host, Brandon Contes.
Alrighty, welcome to episode 59 of the Awful Announcing Podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Contes, and this week we are joined by Jonathan Tannenwald of the Philadelphia Inquirer to discuss some U.S. soccer and MLS. Jonathan, thanks so much for coming on the podcast today, and I do think it's important to note we're recording this on Thursday, July 18th. The podcast is going to get released next Friday, the 26th. In those 8 days, what are the chances that the U.S. men's national team hires somebody to succeed Gregg Berhalter?
At the rate things are going, I think they're pretty good. So we can certainly disclaim that right away. And let me say thank you for having me on. Long-time reader, as Ken Fang will tell you. First time caller. So I'm very happy to be here.
I like to be up front. I'm not a soccer expert by any means. I'm a step above Mike Francesa, being surprised to learn that soccer players kick with both legs. But I don't have a ton of insight to offer, so I do appreciate you being here for that. The timing of Berhalter's firing, in your opinion, too soon, too late, or just right?
I will say just right, at the risk of being too milquetoast for the greater public, which already likes to yell at me on Twitter a lot. No, look, here's the thing. I would not have brought him back after the 2022 World Cup. Not because of the scandal, not because of Gio Reyna, but because there are good reasons to not give national team managers two terms in the men's game or the women's game. And unless you're Jill Ellis, who won multiple World Cups, or Didier Deschamps in France, who has won multiple championships. I think there was ample reason to move on and go get somebody else. They didn't. It is easier for me to say now in hindsight, knowing what I do, which is that the players really wanted Gregg Berhalter back. They said so very loudly. Christian Pulisic, Tim Weah, Anthony Robinson, Yunus Musa. These are all important players on the national team, speaking clearly, saying we want Gregg Berhalter back. Matt Crocker was 6 weeks into his job as U.S. Soccer sporting director. He did a lot of things. He said, there were a lot of tests, interviews, all that stuff. I'm sure Gregg Berhalter aced them all. He's very good at doing that, and he is a fine person. I'm not sure he was Matt Crocker's first choice to bring back, but if the players' votes were what swung it, okay. So then you can now say, okay, I gave you a year. Things didn't get better. If you're going to change tack before a World Cup, 2 years out is the right time to do it. I'm putting my foot down as the sporting director and going and getting somebody else. I don't think that's so much of a problem.
So why do you say good reason to not give a coach two terms, and how does that balance with the players calling for him to be back?
National teams are an unusual beast when it comes to coaching. You want to keep having fresh voices in there because the players are always changing. Even when you have a young team at a certain time, there are always going to be new players in. You always want new players coming in, and you want there to be competition for places when you have a deep pool of talent, which the United States does now. So you always want somebody, every few years, you want somebody new to come in who can evaluate the talent with a fresh set of eyes, figure out who should be there, figure out who needs a little bit of a kick in the rear to get going further again, which I think some of these players do. And then you go from there.
So is it almost a good thing that the U.S. had such a disappointing showing in Copa America? The fact that it allowed them to have a reset?
No.
So how far would they have had to go to save Berhalter's job?
If they'd made the semifinals, I think they would have saved his job. If they'd beaten Uruguay and say that another way. If they'd made the quarterfinals, he probably would have kept his job. But the manner would have probably, depending on the manner, people would have complained.
Yeah.
The fascinating thing would have been if they'd beaten Uruguay and got out anyway, because they'd have the signature win, but not be in the quarterfinals. And then it would have been a Rorschach test, a giant blob of a piece of ink on a piece of paper. in terms of what you think of it. The way it all happened, they lost to Panama, which was really bad. They're out in the group stage, squandering by far the biggest opportunity they have to play games that really matter against big-time teams before the World Cup in 2026. Because they aren't qualifying, because all of the major European and South American, Asian, and African teams are very busy, there is not going to be the opportunity to play games that good for the most part. Maybe one shot next summer, and then like right before the World Cup in the spring of 26, but that's it. So this was a huge opportunity, and it was squandered. They lost to Panama. They had the stupid red card, the inexcusable red card by Tim Weah. It sort of descended from there, and you go into a situation where you have to beat an Uruguay team that they were not going to beat. Uruguay's a better team, a much better team, better talent, better cohesion, better, fighting for every ball. And the U.S. played well in that game, but did not score. I mean, and they lost. So, and then you had Panama beating Bolivia. There was a moment where Bolivia had tied the game, and the U.S. had hope, and then they conceded a goal 30 seconds later. That's as good a script as you can come up with, as it were. So at the end, I was in Kansas City for that game, and I walked out of there thinking, okay, there's no ambiguity here. They have lost. They have failed at something. There need to be consequences for it, and there were, and that's a good thing.
How much of the blame falls on Berhalter? How much falls on the players? How much falls on U.S. soccer? And like, does one deserve more blame than the other?
Yes, and not very much in that order. Berhalter deserves the blame. Yes, the team, he had a year to make the team better. It did not. The players were a little too comfortable. His tactics are a little too complicated. He could not. If you go back to the two friendlies at preceded the Copa América, big games against Colombia and Brazil, they got smoked 5-1. Awful loss to Colombia, which is a really good team. Really, really good team, obviously. But then they came back and they played really well. They fought hard. They tied Brazil. It was only the second time ever in the 20 meetings, whatever it is, that they have not lost to Brazil. So that was good. Then they play really well against Bolivia. The game's over in 10 minutes. It would have been nice if they'd scored more goals. Sure. Then they really blow it against Panama. And they have to beat Uruguay, and they play well, but they don't win. It's the down, up, down, up, down, up, and the consistency of the effort and the intangibles and some of the stuff like that had a lot of us saying that's where Gregg is responsible if he can't get the guys to play at that level every game. And it's not, the players have to play, and I'll get to the players in a second. But it's just one of those things where, again, maybe you just need a new voice in there to try to create a different message that creates a little bit of a better outcome. They don't need a stick of dynamite thrown into that team. They just need to be made better. Now, is it the players' fault? Absolutely. This is a thing about soccer that doesn't get talked a lot about in America. And I try to talk about it, and then people realize I might have a good point every once in a while. Soccer to a much greater degree than the traditional American sports is a game where the players play the game. The coach does not have very much impact. He picks the lineup, which is a big deal. He picks the substitutions, which also matter. But the players play the game from the one whistle to the end. 100%. There's no, and I think there's sort of a complex among some people in American soccer where we expect the coach to be this all-conquering, all-knowing hero who saves the day and transforms people and is a magician and waves his hand and everything goes well. And I think some of that comes from how certain managers in Europe are very famous. Sorry for drinking so much water live on air, but I'm talking a lot, so it's okay.
All good.
There's a lot of managers in Europe who the cameras are on them all the time. They're perceived to do big things. They don't actually. In club management, it's different because you're with the players every day. National team management, you got to pick the right team, figure out a good system, encourage the players to go well, then it's out of your hands. The players go play. Now, you add to that that in the traditional American sports, the American football head coach is standing on the sideline with a piece of paper in his hands and a microphone on his head, literally calling every play into the quarterback.
Yeah.
The basketball coach calls timeout, which you don't have in soccer, and draws up an inbounds pass on the whiteboard with 5 seconds to go with every little X and O. The baseball manager walks onto the field and takes out the pitcher. That doesn't happen in soccer. And there should not be the expectation, I think, that the manager in soccer is going to solve all the ills of the world. And I did think this when Berhalter was brought back. And I wrote this. I said, okay, if the players wanted him that badly, let us put some pressure and some burden on the players to deliver in ways that we historically have not in American soccer. We've always said, oh, the coach will do everything. No, put some pressure on the players for once. That's okay, in my book.
So what else needs to be fixed then, aside from the manager?
Not much, I don't think. This generation of talent has talent. There is a deep pool of players. This is good. The best national teams in the world, yes, they have the best top-end talent, but they also have the deepest talent pools. France, Germany, historically, Spain, England now, Brazil, Argentina, the Netherlands historically, Uruguay, Colombia, Portugal. They have deep, when they're at their best, they are pulling from really deep pools of talent. France is the best example of this because the suburbs of Paris, are the greatest concentration of soccer talent in any one specific location in the world. And we also know the proof of this in the United States because we need look no further than the U.S. women's team, which has historically had the deepest pool of talent in the country. Why? Tens of thousands of kids play youth soccer, maybe hundreds of thousands, Then a few thousand go to college. 1,000 or a few hundred play Division I college soccer. A few hundred go to the pros, and then 23 make the national team. That's how it's supposed to work. A great national team program will have 30 great players and 50 really good players that you can pick a 23-player squad from. And somebody's going to get left out and there's going to be a controversy. But if you're fine with, if there's no questions about who made it and who didn't, then that sort of means that's what you got. You should have more than that. And the U.S. on the men's side is now finally starting to get there.
Who do you think will replace Berhalter and who do you think should?
At this moment when we are speaking, Patrick Vieira seems to be the leading candidate. He has managed at Nice and Strasbourg in France. He is French. He played for France to great acclaim. He's a legendary player. He also played club soccer for Arsenal and Manchester City. He was a serial winner as a player. He has coached Nice and Strasbourg, as I said, in France, Crystal Palace in the English Premier League, and New York City FC in MLS. He has not been a serial winner as a manager. He has been moderately successful, probably not as successful as some people would like. That is a knock against him. He has also never been in a national team environment. That is a knock against him. However, if you would like an international name of consequence who would command respect from players and say, I've done this, I know what it takes, and knows something about the United States and what he's going to walk into, I think Patrick Vieira is a very good fit. And I even though I'm based in Philadelphia, obviously I cover MLS as a whole.
Yeah.
I was around him a few times when he was with New York, and he spoke very glowingly about how much he enjoyed coaching American players. They wanted to learn. They wanted to work hard. They wanted to do well. Maybe they didn't know everything, but they listened to him and they were willing to be taught. And those players significantly included Joe Scally, who is now one of the top right backs for the U.S. men's national team. I think James Sands also, who's been in Europe for a few years now and has had a couple cups of coffee with the national team, also played for New York at that time. And Gio Reyna was in New York City FC's academy back then. My math is right, which I'm pretty sure it is. He knows something about American soccer that is good, I think, and that is a benefit that is. It means that if he walks into here and finds things, he will be less surprised by them, I think.
What did you think of Tim Howard's pitch to go after Jurgen Klopp?
Fine. You try it. I liked him. Nice guy. I have the same problem with a lot of the fans who were saying, oh my God, we'll crowdfund raise $20 million to hire Jurgen Klopp. Go ahead. If he turns around and says, I don't actually care about you, which he has every right to do, then what? I do not subscribe to the theory that the U.S. men's national team should hire a big name in order to make fans feel good about themselves being patted on the head by somebody famous. There's a hot take line for you. You can clip that and make it viral on all the social media platforms, I'm sure.
So did you think, was Tim sincere in that, or was he more looking to make headlines by?
No, I think he was sincere. I think Jurgen Klopp would make a great coach for this team. But he said when he left Liverpool, I'm going to go sit on the beach for a year, and I might never coach again for the rest of my life. And U.S. fans wanted to pay him into changing his mind. What if he wasn't going to change his mind? Then what?
Got a lot of money sitting there. What did you think of Alexi Lalas saying that he would coach the U.S. team if the United States Soccer Federation asked him to?
I didn't watch him, so I don't know what he was talking about.
Would you?
That for the answer?
Yeah. What would you think of?
I'll get an earful from Fox for that, but that's okay.
What would you think of him getting that offer? Is that something that would?
No. It's okay. People sit on TV and now, and here's the funny thing.
All right. Go ahead.
There is a history of people going on American television and using it to try to talk their way into the U.S. men's national team job. Jurgen Klinsmann did it during the 2010 World Cup when he was with ABC and ESPN, and he ended up getting the job, and he sort of went on TV and said, I can fix it. Now, U.S. Soccer had already had some interest in him, but still, he goes on TV and he says, I can fix it. Well, guess what? Yeah, he did a few good things, but by and large, he didn't fix it. He broke it. And Gregg Berhalter, the greatest thing Gregg Berhalter did in his tenure was fix the things that Jurgen Klinsmann broke. Berhalter did not achieve enough success on the field, but he did a lot of good things. Thierry Henry threw his hat in the ring at one point from CBS's Champions League studio, said that he wanted to coach the United States, and he's actually done some coaching in his life. And it was not much of it. He was in Montreal and then in Monaco, and he wasn't really very good as a club coach. We're going to find out very soon how good he really is as a soccer coach, because he's coaching France's Olympic team, and it's a very talented team, but he did not get all the players he wants because you're not required to release players from clubs for the Olympics. There are a lot of really good guys he didn't get, and now we're going to see how good a coach he really is.
Has there ever been an example of a player turned broadcaster that goes right into coaching, similar to JJ Redick in the NBA?
I'm sure there has, but it's a big world out there. I don't know.
Do you have an opinion of Alexi, the analyst? Somebody, he was so beloved as a player, and then Fox now trots him out there as if he's soccer's version of Charles Barkley, but it seems like nobody really enjoys him.
I think that the target audience there is well known. I don't think anybody makes any bones about that. I've been friends with Alexi for a long time. I don't talk to him very much these days. I have an employment contract that I stick to sports, if I may sort of initially phrase it that way. So there are certain things that I'm not going to talk about on here. Sorry to you and to the listeners. I disagree with him on a lot of things. I don't work in television, Um, I don't watch a lot of studio programming. For as
Sure.
much as I write about soccer and as much as I've written about soccer on TV over the years, I don't watch a lot of studio programming, mainly because I'm watching so many games.
Yeah.
But there is no requirement that you have to watch the studio show. And there is no requirement that you have to watch Fox. All of the games are also on in Spanish. You can watch. And Univision or on Telemundo or wherever they may be, if you'd like to. And if you don't understand every word, which I don't, but I speak a little bit of Spanish, enough to understand what I'm watching, and you might find it entertaining. I don't know. I mean, I'm one person in that regard. I'm lucky that I have a lot of experience and a lot of influence in the American soccer media. I'm not going to change anything single-handedly about what Fox does. I know that.
Sure.
That's where I'd leave it, I think.
Sounds good. I appreciate that response. We're a few years out. Still, as of today, don't know who the coach is going to be. But what are some realistic expectations for the U.S. men's national team at the 2026 World Cup?
Look, they need to make a deep run. They need to get all their talent together, play to their best, and make a serious run. Does that mean the semifinals? I don't know. Does it probably mean winning at least one game in the knockout rounds? Probably two. Make the quarters? Yes, I think that's probably what it means. They've won one knockout round game in the modern era, and it was against Mexico in 2002. They got a little lucky that Mexico was the opponent. How good they're actually going to be in 26, I don't know. But they're going to have the home field advantage. They're going to have the big stage. They're probably going to have a favorable draw. And beyond that, there's never been a round of 32 in a World Cup before because of the expansion to 48 teams. So we really don't know how that's going to go. But they've got to make a deep run and show that all the work that they've put in over these years has paid off in something tangible that people can really get behind and then further elevate the sport into the mainstream going forward.
I know you mentioned you were in Kansas City. Were you at SoFi Stadium for the final?
No, that was the only game I went to.
Okay. Did they have the $25 hot dog? I'm curious, in Kansas City.
I'll go behind the curtain here for a minute. They had no media meal.
No media meal.
We all went downstairs to the concession stands. I got a decent little barbecue sandwich. That was fine, but no, it was not. It was not optimal. Look, and I'm not going to use the media meal as the main example for CONMEBOL's trouble with the logistics and all of this stuff. But I am going to say, and I've said this many times, and I'm sure your listeners have seen it, the party chiefly responsible for all the logistical problems at the Copa América, from the problems with the media operations to the problems with teams' travel and practice facilities to obviously the problems with security and ticketing and all of that. That is all on CONMEBOL, period. And they should be blamed first and foremost, and by a long ways more than anybody else. I know this because I've spoken with people. I spoke before the tournament to CONMEBOL's chief operating officer for a story I did on the business side of the thing and how much money it was going to make. I didn't print at the time everything I asked him about, all the logistical stuff. But so CONMEBOL in 2016 hired Soccer United Marketing to run all the logistics. And people don't like Soccer United Marketing because they're tied into all the MLS owners and they don't know where the money goes, behind the scenes. I get that. I don't necessarily like it either. But the people who actually work within SUM and who they hire to do the ground level logistics work at events are really good. They don't mess around with this stuff. They don't short on security budgets. They don't short on logistical budgets. They don't short on the big one, as everybody has talked about, is that there were no extra security perimeters around the stadium in Miami at the final, as there are in every major soccer event you go to around the world, especially a continental international tournament or even major concerts or the Super Bowl or whatever. You have to pass through 3 rings of people checking your tickets a quarter mile out from the stadium before you get anywhere close. If they'd had that, I am sure that most of what we saw on Sunday night, that Sunday night in the final, would not have happened. I know that things will be better in 2026 because I've seen security perimeter plans for Philadelphia 2 years ago. I saw them. They were already done. The one in Miami has been circulated on social media the last few days. People have seen it. All of this is CONMEBOL being cheap. It is clear to me. They didn't really hire enough boots on the ground people. They didn't take the advice of people who told them this is how you really need to do things over here, and it bit them.
So do you have any concerns about the 2026 World Cup then?
Not right now. I mean, the concerns are about the stadiums that are outside of the city centers, Kansas City, Dallas, and so on. But I don't have huge concern. I mean, the concern is how you get there. There's not public transit in all these places. In Philadelphia, the stadium's at the end of a subway line. It's great.
Yeah.
Boston, there's the commuter rail. Miami, there might be something vaguely resembling commuter rail, but that's the difference. That's the thing I'm concerned about. And, I don't know how it's going to go. But a lot of the other logistical stuff, no, I think it's going to be much better than it was.
Did you attend the 2022 World Cup?
No, I have never covered a men's World Cup in person. I've only covered women's World Cups so far. I might have gone to Qatar if the U.S. had been in it.
Okay. Yeah, I was curious if there was any concerns being there, but is there I'm sure there is an estimated number, but I don't know if it's something that's talked about, an estimated number of fans that are going to expected to travel to North America for the World Cup?
I have no idea. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, there's going to be a lot of tickets, and there's going to be a lot of people who come just to be there. I was in New York for something else the day before the Argentina semifinal at MetLife Stadium. And both the games that Argentina played up there, they had thousands of fans converge in Times Square for these parties, singing and dancing and all that they did. You've seen the social media videos. I'm sure some folks out there have too. That's what I want to see in 2026. That's what I'm looking forward to. That cultural stuff coming to the big cities that have never experienced it. That's the part that's going to be a lot of
fun. Messi's ankle injury during the final. What does that injury do for Inter Miami?
Two and a half, I don't know, weeks, 3, I don't know. I'm not a doctor. I haven't, I don't know everything about it. Looked ugly, that's for sure. The League's Cup is coming, so he doesn't have to play in that necessarily. And if he doesn't, maybe it'll expose that nobody really cares about the League's Cup and it's a cash grab with the Mexican teams, which would have been exposed last year had Messi not arrived right when he did. Excuse my cynicism as always.
Does MLS require clubs to be upfront about player injuries the same way like the NFL and other leagues do?
There are rules, but they are not nearly as detailed as they are in other leagues. And this is actually a source of some complaint for the media. There are injury reports that go out on Friday afternoons, but they are compiled in the league office by basically somebody up there reading everybody's game notes.
Yeah.
There are not as detailed standards as there are in other leagues, and we know why those injury reports exist. They are for the betting houses, and the betting houses have not yet compelled MLS to be as detailed.
What has Messi's impact been on the MLS so far?
Enormous. That's no question. No question his impact been enormous and very positive. Lots more people are watching the league than ever before. The jerseys obviously are everywhere. They've made huge, mammoth amounts of money. That's all great. You're seeing them on people who you'd never figure would wear any apparel from any American soccer team, club or national team, whatever, are wearing Inter Miami Messi jerseys. That is unquestionably good.
Yeah.
I think that the marketing has been a little too much Messi oriented at the expense of all the other good players in the league, especially the young players who were being either bought young in South America and then developed and sold, like Thiago Almada in Atlanta and others, and the young players who are coming through the MLS youth academies, the young Americans playing very well and then getting sold onto Europe for serious money. That their Messi is taking up, to me, too much of the spotlight. And I even know people at MLS who believe that. And there's been a little bit of adjustment. And now here I am in Philadelphia with Kevin Sullivan getting piles of attention as a 14-year-old, so much that it even makes me a little uncomfortable, even though I am thrilled to see teenagers turning pro in American soccer, 16, 17, 18. I'm fine with 14. And we're speaking the day after his MLS debut. 14 still makes me a little uncomfortable with how much attention he's gotten. He's got a lot of talent, don't get me wrong. But the Union are purposely bringing him along deliberately as best they can, and that is good. So we can talk about that more, but as I said, Messi unquestionably good for MLS on all kinds of levels. I just wish that he got 60 to 70% of the marketing instead of 80 to 90% of the marketing, whatever it is,
Is Kevin Durant around with the Union at all? I know he's a
I don't
owner.
see him.
No.
I see others of the ownership. I've not seen him in the box.
And how is Messi with media access? Have you covered any of his matches?
I have not. He played in Philadelphia last summer in the Leagues Cup, and I was down at the Women's World Cup at the time. So I was not here. When Miami played here last month, it was 4 days before the Copa America kicked off. He was not here. Everybody knew as soon as the schedule came out that he was not going to be here. And the Union's ticket office, to their credit, even told people who called them in December, he's not going to be here for that game. Please stop asking. People showed up anyway. There were a lot of Messi fans in the stands. The Union blew a 2-0 lead late in the game, and the place was remarkably loud when Miami scored the game winner, and this was a problem. Because the Union were also 2 men up at that point, and they blew the lead. It was really bad. So, but how is he with the media? From what I've heard, he doesn't do very much.
Yeah.
He is not subject to the same access rules as other people are. I certainly understand from a security perspective that you have to do things somewhat differently, but the occasional interview with the local paper or ESPN or The Athletic or Fox would not be such a bad thing in my book.
Yeah. I saw a rumor a few months ago about what are the chances of Ronaldo going to Miami and teaming up with Messi?
I hope not. I certainly think at this point, now that he's in Saudi Arabia, it's probably off the board. I'll be fine without him.
What did you think of his Euro performance?
Hold on. Fine. He passed the ball to somebody else. That was amazing. Portugal went out. I didn't complain. I'm a France fan, so that's where I'm coming from on that.
Where is Ronaldo at in his career? Is it looking
end.
like is he holding on too long, or?
I think he is, but he's got such a huge ego that whatever.
But not time for him to come to the MLS.
I frankly think that time has passed.
Yeah. Why has England struggled to win tournaments over the last more than a half century?
Because they historically have not been that good. They are now. And Gareth Southgate has been, I think, a great manager. They probably need a new voice in there, as happens. But I think he's very good. And I think England now finally, between the money that the clubs spend and the national training center that they have, has really serious tournament talent capable of winning a tournament. I generally don't root for England. I was sort of hoping they'd win these Euros so that the drought would be over before they get here 2 years from now. It would not be good. For me, this is the American in me now talking. And the American who grew up going to these soccer camps run by English guys. They were in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, which is where I used to go in the summer. My parents have, if the East Coasters out there will know what I'm talking about, my parents have had a little place there for 45 years. And I would go to summer camp, summer soccer camp like we all did as little kids. And the guys over there who were teaching would be English guys who were over for a couple weeks of vacation to sit in the sun, teach soccer in the morning, and then go sit on the beach for a while. I've had a view of English people telling Americans how to play soccer ever since then. And some of them are really good friends of mine, but still, the idea of England winning a World Cup on American soil, I cannot abide.
Yeah. How does the current talent pool of the MLS compare to English soccer?
Oh. I mean, it doesn't at the top because of the amount of money in the Premier League. That's obvious. There's no other domestic league in Europe that top to bottom compares to English soccer because of the amount of money. Of course. Do I think if you gave the theoretical question is if American teams had English money, what would happen? Yeah, of course they'd be better. Of course they would. If you dropped the best American teams in the Premier League, would they probably be bottom half of the table? Sure, probably. I'm trying to not blow off the question because it's a perfectly valid question for people who don't follow soccer to ask. I'm not blaming anybody. But if anybody else asks you in the future, tell them it's sort of a nonsense question because because of the amount of money in the English Premier League, there's just no comparison.
Yeah.
And people, look, people, I'll say this too. People watch the Premier League and say, oh, that's all I have to watch. I'm not going to watch American soccer because it's not as good. I know it's not as good. I've been in it for 20 plus years. I'll be the first one to tell you it's not as good. But that shouldn't preclude you from going to support your local team, be it an MLS team or an NWSL team or a lower division team. Part of the fun of soccer is going to it. And you can't go to London every weekend or Mexico City or Buenos Aires or Madrid or Dortmund or what. You can't go there every weekend. You can go watch your local team, and it's okay that the quality is not as good because there's a supporters club, hopefully, and some atmosphere. And it would be nice if the hot dogs were $5 instead of $15 or whatever. But go have a good time, and watch it in person because that's what it's supposed to be about.
Well, I appreciate you handling that question so politely. What about the popularity of the MLS since you've been covering it? How much has that grown, and how much room is there for it to still grow? Like, can you ever see a time where the MLS is approaching what the MLB or NBA are?
Let's go for the NHL first on that. The MLS has grown immeasurably since I was a kid going to DC United games at RFK Stadium in the 2000s, which were great fun. It's where I learned the sport culturally and sort of tactically. It still has immeasurable room to grow, which is great.
Yeah.
Will it overtake the NHL someday? I think. Look, in Atlanta, it certainly has. There's in Kansas City, in places where there's a soccer team but no hockey team, and the soccer team is a big deal. You walk into those cities and you feel it. In Kansas City and in Seattle and Portland and in Atlanta,
Yeah.
And certainly you feel it culturally as a sport overall, if not MLS, which is part of the problem. In LA, Houston, New York, Chicago, even here in Washington. Washington has supported its local teams, men's and women's, very well for many decades. Philadelphia, the Union have a fan base, but their stadium is way out of town and there's no public transit, which makes it harder for a lot of people who would be soccer fans who live in the city to go. And that's always been a complaint of mine. But the one thing that I wish for, I think the Apple deal is good on a lot of levels, but I still would like to see more games be on traditional television overall.
Yeah.
Because there is exposure that brings that Apple has not provided. And like the Apple deal in theory was a great idea. I actually think Apple hasn't done enough marketing. Apple's the best marketing entity on the planet. And I still don't think they've done a lot, but I still don't think they've done enough.
Yeah.
You don't go in an Apple store and see MLS promoted. You don't really see billboards enough. I live in a city, so, bus station ads, stuff like that. You go to Washington. I don't know, Brandon, where you are, but
Long Island.
Long Island. Okay. If you go to Washington, D.C., take the train down there, you get off at Union Station. The Washington Spirit, the NWSL team, have bought for a long time now rotations on all the billboards in the station and in some of the metro stations and on bus shelters and stuff like that. That's marketing. Ain't cheap either. That's marketing. That's the stuff, some of the things that Apple hasn't necessarily pushed the content hard enough as I would like to see.
Yeah. Is the men's Olympic team, is that roster entirely different from the Copa America team?
Almost entirely. There's only one player doing both.
Okay.
Miles Robinson of FC Cincinnati, who was on the Copa squad but did not play, so his legs are fresh. The Olympics in men's soccer are an under 23 age group tournament. And in qualifying, it's exclusively under 23s, or sometimes it's other like under 21s or under 20 tournaments that are used. When you get there, you're allowed to have 3 overage players because FIFA and the IOC would like to sell some tickets and have TV viewers and so on. So I'm going to vamp for a moment while I pull up the squads to give some examples of the overage players who are on the teams. And I'm going to keep talking while not actually saying anything until the page loads, which it now has.
Perfect.
Argentina has Nicolas Otamendi and Julian Alvarez, both of whom are overage and were on the Copa America squad and played a lot. I am surprised that they are doubling up. Spain, which is another significant medal favorite, has got enough. They didn't double anybody over. I think there was some interest in having Lamine Yamal double over because he's age eligible, but they decided to not. But they still have 2 really big-time young players in Fermin Lopez and Pau Cubarsí of Barcelona. Lopez is 21. Cubarsí is a 17-year-old center back who's already played a lot for the first team. He is a stud. The third top medal contender is France, obviously the host team. As I said earlier, Thierry Henry didn't get everybody he wants. You've got Alexander Lacazette, who's a great veteran striker. Jean-Philippe Mateta of Crystal Palace is very good. Loic Bade of Sevilla is the other overage player, though he's not a top-level guy. And the guy to watch is Michael Olise, who's a striker, 22 years old, who just moved from Crystal Palace to Bayern Munich for a ton of money.
Who coaches the U.S. Olympic team?
Marko Mitrovic, not anybody most people have heard of. He's Serbian. Gregg Berhalter liked him. He's been around the program a bit. Nice guy. Very down to earth. Very cool. I like him personally. I have no idea how good of a coach he is. So as a representative goes, he's fine.
Yeah. When the Olympics are done, is he involved with the men's national team?
Maybe. I mean, if the new guy wants him, sure. If some MLS team wants him, sure. Godspeed. Be happy for it. If he gets an MLS job after this, I'd be more than happy for it.
Yeah. level of surprise to see Alex Morgan left off the Olympic team?
Some, but not too much. Her form did not justify including her. I think everybody knew that. I still thought she might go because you want her as a presence out there on the field. And with a 23-player roster, maybe she would have. But with an 18-player roster plus 4 alternates who travel but only play in case of injury, I think it is justifiable to not have her. Now we're going to find out because the last 2 games in their warm-up games, they've only scored 1 goal. I wrote a big piece about this a couple of days ago after the second game in D.C., which was a scoreless tie where they had 26 shots, 12 on target, but couldn't put any in the net. And I reckon that Alex Morgan might have put one of them in the net because she's got a little more of an instinctive finishing touch than some of the young players on this team. Emma Hayes, who's a great manager, I think very highly of her. She plays a 4-3-3. She wants those front 3 players to rotate around left, right, and center during the game. It usually starts with Sophia Smith, who's the purest striker in the middle, Trinity Rodman on the right, Mal Swanson, who's a veteran, on the left. They can all score. They can all pass. But for the first time in maybe this team's history, there is not a true focal point presence at the top of the attack. And I'm not just talking about Alex Morgan. You go back to Abby Wambach and Shannon McMillan before her and Mia Hamm before her. Always been there. They don't have it now because they want to play a different style. It may well work. I think in the long run it will work. But right now, when a team has 26 shots but doesn't score in its send-off game, a light switch goes on.
What has Emma Hayes, former coach of the Long Island Lady Riders, by the way, what has she brought to the women's team?
I will disclaim that I've known her since her coaching days in Chicago in the old WPS before the NWSL. I've known her a long time. Not always well, but we've run into each other on numerous occasions and recognize each other, and I'm very happy for her that she has the job. She is a terrific personality. She is a great coach. She is mostly coached the club game. Obviously, she's not done a ton with national teams. But she's got charisma and she's got chops, and the players listen to her and they really like her. And she's a fabulous quote. There's no way around that. And I'm sure that there are times when I will fall for it. I get that. And again, I've known her for a long time. So I'm able to ask questions that get good quotes out of her. But she's a terrifically charismatic person. And she said yes to the job last November.
Yeah.
And then the deal was they'd wait 6 months until Chelsea's season was over so that she could get one more shot at winning the Champions League. She did some coaching and meetings from afar. She came over once in December to meet with the players and a little bit with the media. She's only had 4 games so far, and 2 of them the first 2 looked really good against South Korea. The third against Mexico looked very good, but it took them too long to score. And they scored a brilliant goal when they did. And the last one was a scoreless tie. So they're not there yet. She is patient. She is there for the 2027 World Cup. Fans are impatient. They would like an Olympic medal. And nobody's wrong on that one. I think she'd like a medal too. But, let's now see what happens, because they absolutely can win their group. I think they have the talent. That Zambia game is going to be really hard. That actually is the one that I have the most circled, because they've got two strikers up top, and Barbara Bander and Rachel Kundanaji, who are electric, fast, skilled, great finishers. Banda, you might follow the NWSL, Brandon. I don't know. Banda, they're both in their first year in the NWSL. Banda plays in Orlando. Kundanaji plays for Bay FC out in San Jose. Banda's tied for the top scorer in the league. 12 goals in 12 games going into the Olympic break. I've watched her a lot. She is electric. She really is. It's a good thing she plays in the NWSL because the players know her. That's going to help. But they got to work hard and ideally not go down 1-0 early and have to climb out of a hole. Germany is a great team, ranked number 3 in the world, mostly on merit. They crashed out of the last World Cup very badly in the group stage, even worse than what the U.S. did, and frankly, even more shocking that they went out then. They've just lost Lena Oberdorf, unfortunately, who's one of their top creative players, to I think it was an ACL injury just a couple days ago. Awful, awful news. It does make Germany worse. Germany is still a very good team. The U.S. and Germany should both advance. Australia is the 4th team. The U.S. and Australia know each other exceptionally well. There will be nothing unfamiliar to either team when they're out there. Australia made the semifinals of the World Cup last year at home. Great momentum. They've got a lot of very good players. They have only one truly elite player in Sam Kerr, and she is out with an ACL injury she suffered a while ago. I think Zambia can beat Australia, and I think the Australians know it. And a lot of people are watching for that. I think the U.S. can win the group, and then things will get very interesting very quickly, because if they win their group and Spain, as great as they are, do not win their group, which is eminently possible for a reason I'll explain in a moment, it would be USA-Spain in the quarterfinals, and then all hell breaks loose. Spain is the reigning World Cup champion, for folks who don't know. They play beautiful soccer. They are stacked deep with talent. They have the world's best player right now in Aitana Bonmati, and a number of other just outstanding, skilled, quick, fast-thinking, all of it, every piece. But they are prone to slipping up, and they have slipped up in some recent games against European opponents. And last year at the World Cup, the game that everybody could not get out of their minds until Spain won the whole thing. Spain won their first 2 group games, and people started to believe. And then in the last one, they got clocked by Japan 4-0, even though Japan only had 23% of the possession. And everybody immediately went back to not trusting Spain to win the whole thing. To their credit, they then went on to win the whole thing. They even had a comeback in one of their knockout games. It was very impressive. But if Spain slips in the group stage, and they've got Brazil, Japan, and I believe Nigeria, I will tell you that in a second, as I vamp again, trying to talk and say nonsense while I pull a website up. Let's see here. Here we are. Yes, they've got Brazil, Japan, and Nigeria. They'll beat Nigeria. Is not great right now. But if Brazil or Japan gets them, and Spain finishes second in their group, and the U.S. wins their group, it's U.S.-Spain in the quarterfinals instead of later, and then, as I said, all hell breaks loose.
Obviously the World Cup ended in disappointment last year for the U.S., but with other countries investing more in women's soccer, does the United States almost need to adjust their expectations for the women's team?
Not yet. Especially potentially hosting the World Cup in 2031. This current team is young, but it is experienced. A lot of those young players were at the World Cup last year. While the U.S. is getting better, while the other countries are getting better, the U.S. is also getting better. And once the NWSL has a full-time pipeline going of homegrown players at youth academies like what the men's side has, they're going to start churning out great young players even more than they already are as well. They will not be the sole superpower in the sport, but they will certainly be a contender at every major tournament.
Which gap has been closed more, the world to the U.S. women or the U.S. men to the world?
The world to the U.S. women, I would say.
When is it realistic to say that the U.S. men should be able to win a World Cup?
I have no idea.
Not in 2026.
No. You need so much as a country.
Yeah.
What needs to happen for the United States to win a World Cup? So much. So very much, I would say. And I will tell you, I was born in 1983. There have been since then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 World Cups in my lifetime at this point. Only 2 of them were won by a team that had never won a World Cup before. France in 1998 and Spain in 2010. And we know how good those nations are now.
Yeah.
It takes so much to win a World Cup. It really does. And that's the best way I can explain it, I think.
Jonathan, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. All the best to you guys, and keep up the great work.
Thank you. That is Jonathan Tannenwald. I'm Brandon Contes. This is the Awful Announcing Podcast. Please rate and subscribe to this podcast. Please also subscribe to Awful Announcing's YouTube page. But regardless of how you consume Awful Announcing and the Awful Announcing Podcast, thanks for listening and be good.
Thanks for listening to the Awful Announcing Podcast. For the latest news spanning the sports media landscape and more, check out awfulannouncing.com and follow us at Awful Announcing.